this is an opportunity to reflect of the early days of the caucus. And so let's start from the very beginning. So I know you're from the famous city of Cheraw, South Carolina. And tell me a little bit about Cheraw first.
Oh, it's the prettiest town in Dixie, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what they say.
It's about 100 miles south of here.
Right.
And every year, in the third week in October, they have a jazz festival. It's called South Carolina Festival. But we in Cheraw call it the Dizzy Gillespie Festival because Dizzy was from our hometown.
Mm-hmm.
And the state of South Carolina financed the first conferences, the first festivals. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it has the name. Mm-hmm. South Carolina Jazz Festival. But we're very proud and we have a good time. It's just a whole weekend of just have a good time.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So.
And it's also when the black troops marched on Charleston, the white planters fled to Cheraw.
They
so
did.
It has a history, a long history of the whole southern town.
That was nice to find out.
Yeah. So you went to public school initially and then go ahead.
Yes. Initially I was born in Washington, D.C.
That's right.
Okay. And then I was shipped along with my sister and brother down to Cheraw, South Carolina, where we stayed for the next 10 years, from age 8 to 18. And there I went through the what is it called, segregation or integration by choice. And so I went to the predominantly white high school as compared to going to the black high school there in town. And that led me to continue my struggle for education and ended up in New York.
So first of all, how was that? You started out at the black school when you first came to
elementary school.
Elementary school. Uh-huh. And then you went to the integrated school. How was that?
By choice.
By choice. Well, by your choice or
by parental choice?
That's right, by parental choice. So how was that experience?
It was not pleasant. It left lots of bitter taste in your mouth.
I see. So do you think that affected your willingness to work in, the movement or the struggle of African American?
It probably influenced it more so, the need to have comrades. I was, of 700 students in the high school, we were 20. 20 black students, and, that was kind of lonely, especially in class, and not having opportunities or knowing the answers and not being called on, and being female and not male in the science classes and that kind of thing.
I think those kinds of early experiences, affect our willingness to be active, later on in life. That's why we have so few actives today. So anyway. So then after you left your high school, you went to?
I've always wanted to be a nurse. So I chose colleges that offered nursing. And initially I went to a school in New Jersey called Fairleigh Dickinson University.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
We called it Fairly Ridiculous. But it was in Rutherford, New Jersey, which now has that big stadium. It was not there.
Right.
And I had a house mother who thought with my big afro that, the guy that came to see me, he was a male, and she thought he was a female, so it was interesting times. But they had a house mother, and she was like a house grandmother. Really.
Right.
And after 2 years there, I chose to go to Columbia University, where I had a brother in the college.
I see. Now, what was there a particular incident or set of things that made you want to leave Fairleigh Dickinson?
Yes, it was fairly ridiculous what happened, but I was a participant in student government, and it was on the judicial council for the school. And a nursing student appealed to the Judicial Council because she was given a failing grade for her senior year first semester course. And the Judicial Council decided that she should be given the group grade and not an individual grade, because that's what the criteria of the course and stuff. The School of Nursing decided that the Department of Nursing decided that she was going to fail. They failed her in the course, even though the Judicial Council and the Dean's Judicial Council said not to. And I thought that if they treated that young lady like that her senior year, I wasn't going to continue in the school and have that happen to me, because I'm working too hard. So I looked at other schools to go to. At the time, the school was not also accredited, and that didn't help me to want to stay at the school with it not being accredited.
Yeah.
So since this was my end of my second year in college, I chose to transfer to Columbia University, which accepted the second year, third year people.
As I remember, Fairleigh Dickinson was one of the schools actually sought to recruit students from the South. I remember getting a letter from them. Why?
Well, it was just that this was not a minority issue. This was a student that was appealing.
I see.
And I felt that if they treated her that way, what's going to happen to me? And there are 3 black students in the nursing program.
Right,
And so I didn't want to get into my senior year.
All right. And then
and have something like that happen to me. So I chose to transfer.
Okay.
And that was great because, Columbia offered lots of
options.
of great opportunities.
Yes.
And so that's where I ended up.
And
I had 2 brothers in the city, and that was wonderful.
Right. And Columbia had a long history of minority students, even back in the 20s, when they had, So, okay. So you went to Columbia those last 2 years. You focused on nursing, and you were graduated.
And I went into public health.
You went into public health, working right away.
I went into the visiting nurse service, which was the original Henry Street settlement that Lillian Wall started.
Yes.
So I was there in real public health.
Wow.
Visiting in the community, various kinds of families that needed instructions, nursing care.
Now, what area of the city was?
It's Harlem.
What street?
125th.
Oh.
To 110. 8th Avenue.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Real Harlem.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
Back then, there were lots of folks on the streets, and you would see the junkies just about falling.
That's right.
I walked through those crowds.
Yeah.
I had an escort. We had escorts.
Right, of course.
Someone that went with us so that we would, quote, be safe.
Right.
I served the community for 2 years, but after my first year, I went to Africa. They had charter flights over to Africa, and I went for a month. And there, every time I told someone I was from South Carolina, they said Chapel Hill. And I knew Chapel Hill because of basketball and TV and stuff. And so Chapel Hill, and that was because they had a population program over in Ghana.
Absolutely.
And it was very popular. But so whenever I said Carolina, they said Chapel Hill.
That's right.
And so I said, if any place is known all over the world, that's the place I wanted to go.
Right.
So I came back to New York, and even though I really, really would have liked to have gone to Teachers College because I wanted to be a teacher, I chose to come to Chapel Hill because of that international experience I had.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah, they were handing out contraceptives left and right.
Yes, well, that's how I ended up in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think the Mailman School of Public Health had really started back in the early 70s.
Right.
But I did want to be a teacher, and I could become a teacher at Teachers College. And that was very
So what year was this that you went to Africa?
I went to 1975.
75. Okay. All right. And so you actually applied to Carolina for graduate school.
Yes.
To Chapel Hill for graduate school.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And so you were accepted in the School of Nursing?
In the Department of Nursing at the School of Public Health.
Oh, so there was a Department of Nursing.
Back
That's
then.
right.
Public
That's
health-
right. There was a
public health
Department of
nursing.
Yeah,
Nursing.
public health nursing.
That's right.
And they offered a two-year master's.
Okay.
In fact, the master's really isn't from the School of Public Health. It's a 2-year master's from because it's education. It's an MS, not an MS-PH, but an MS.
Oh.
Comes out of the education department.
Hmm.
So it was housed here at the School of Public
Right,
Health.
right.
And so I came knowing I was going to come for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd have to do a thesis, and an internship wasn't required, but I chose to do one down in oh gracious, where you gonna move to? That's where, down in Beaufort, South Carolina.
Oh, yeah. Of course. St. Helena.
St. Helena's Island. That's where I stayed when I went.
Oh, okay, okay. So was there a health facility on St. Helena at the time?
No. I studied with the health department because my thesis, my theme for graduate school was going to be ethnic diversity instruction
Oh.
in baccalaureate nursing programs.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a continued theme from my college thesis,
Mm-hmm.
which had to do with black students at majority schools where they don't teach about black people
Right.
correctly. And so once I got here, I wanted to continue the thought, and it's called ethnic diversity instruction at the time. And so I wanted to see I hear about the diversity of people down in the coast of South Carolina. Since I'm from South Carolina, I wanted to find out more about the
Us.
Yeah, the
Us
Geechee
Geechees.
people. The low country folks.
That's right.
Low country.
That's right.
And
That's right.
Since I was from high country.
That's right.
Okay.
That's
All
right.
So,
Exactly.
anyway, that was so, and the idea was to look to see what instructions were available
Mm-hmm.
to be integrated into the curriculum.
Mhm.
Less more, they weren't there, but
Mhm.
you know what was available. And so
Mm-hmm.
I got good experience down in St. Helena Island, and working with the people and seeing the diversity there. But that was just.
So did you have to overcome the language barrier, or was that fairly easy for you?
It was a little bit easy. It was no more worse than going to England and can't understand folk.
That's true. It is true.
You know, my most frustrating time overseas when 1971, when I went to Europe, was not in Amsterdam, where they speak another language, but was in England. I couldn't understand what anybody said.
Right.
So when I went to Low Country,
Yeah.
I can remember getting instructions there in Charleston, and I said, "What did he say?"
Right. Right. Well, we felt the same way about you.
Oh, okay.
So after that experience, how long did you stay with the?
It was a 6 week.
Yeah, so it was just 6 months.
6 weeks. 6 weeks.
6 weeks
during the summer.
That's right. So after you finished the UNC.
Oh, the 2 years, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Were there any other experiences within that 2 years?
Yeah, well, that was working with the caucus
Right.
at the time.
Okay.
And I call it the Minority Student Caucus
Right.
because at the time that I took over as co-chair,
Right.
the paperwork said Minority Student Caucus.
Yeah, right.
Now, I know that the history was that it was called Black Student Caucus.
That's right. At first.
At first. And
Right.
so it evolved
Right.
into the Minority Student
That's
Caucus.
right. That's right.
And during those 2 years, you know, you met some really neat people from all over, and that was one of the good things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were lots of local folks that were here in graduate school, but we didn't get to know them very well because they were commuting back to their homes,
Right.
and a lot of times they might have lived out maybe 30 miles out, so they just came in for class and left.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there were a lot of nice, good people that you got to meet that were here for the 2 years stint.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember that time.
Now, one of the things that I do appreciate was when I first got here and having to take all those basic public health courses. And, you know, my fear of math, as a good nurse would be, or we usually are,
Yeah.
that that you and some of the other more mature or the doctoral students came by and said, listen, we're going to have a study session.
That's right.
You got to come to it. Okay?
Right.
And that was tremendously helpful.
Yeah.
Because, one, we had to get together.
Right.
And get to know some other folks that we wouldn't have gotten to know otherwise. But it helped us to learn under small group what was going on as far as biostatistics and epidemiology.
Exactly.
So.
That's right. So Jim Morrell was the lead person on biostat, and I was the lead person on epidemiology. And we called it the Survival Committee because a year or two prior to your coming, African American students did not do well on either course. That was a terrible year for black students' survival here at UNC, and so we got together and decided to create a committee, the Survival Committee, to make sure that no black student came to UNC and didn't pass Epi or Biostat with at least a B. Mm-hmm. And once we created that committee, that's exactly what happened, and it's a committee that's maybe not needed as much today because so many of our students attend majority universities, but clearly it was needed then. And I think sometimes it's needed today. It's unfortunate that most students just don't see them as needing it until sometimes it's too late. But that was the Survival Committee was a great
yeah, see, I didn't
thing.
realize until right now, a few minutes ago when we were talking earlier, that that's what you were talking about.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand survival committee. Why are you trying to survive? Keep the survival, the black student survival.
Yeah.
It wasn't, and I understand now why you called it that.
That's right.
Because it was for us to survive
Right.
those two courses.
That's right, exactly.
I could get everything else, but
Yeah.
I couldn't understand some of the dynamics behind taking a course that required you to understand and then do the math too.
Right. Yeah. I think it was a great experience for all of us, those of us who sort of taught, if you will, or tutored, and the students who went, because we got together not only because of the mutual benefits that it provided each of us, but because of that camaraderie. It gave strength to doing the Minority Health Conference, which had been an idea out there for a couple of years that Bob Kelly had been talking about to us, and but it's not. It is. Sorry. How do I turn this off? Okay. So it was that camaraderie that got together. And then the other thing is that non-black students started participating. Lumbee Indians from North Carolina wanted to participate come to the tutoring sessions and so on, because they were having a difficult time as well. So it was a great experience.
Tell me, did you all have, as the Survival Committee, it was not formal?
No.
It was very informal.
Very.
But it included the doctoral students. Is that?
Yeah.
Because, that's the only people that you knew for sure did well in those classes.
Well, Jim was a staff person in the Epi department and had been a teaching assistant in biostat.
Okay.
And I was a doctoral student in Epi and was a teaching assistant in the epidemiology course. So both of us had experience tutoring students. But the difference was that we focused specifically on making sure that African American students initially passed those two courses, because just a few years before was disastrous for African American students.
And one of the things that I think about the fact that there were lots of minority doctoral students that were in and out, but we
Yeah.
never got to really see them.
That's right,
That's
yeah,
That's
yeah.
why, because I remember Leo Jenkins,
Leo Hendricks.
and I just remember seeing him in passing,
right.
but
He was
never
there.
really got to, I
Yeah.
knew he was in one of
Leo
those,
wanted to be in and out, so he was real focused about getting out.
Getting out of here. Huh?
Getting out of here, right. And Jim, because he was staff, was here a good number of hours during the day, and I was here a good number of hours a day because I worked for Abdul Amran and had an office space, or at least a table space, I guess. And my wife at the time was on the faculty in maternal and child health, so the two of us were here a lot of the time. That's why students remember us. But a lot of the black students who were working on their doctorate lived away from the school and did not spend time. Although Leo and his wife lived down on 54, Glen Lennox apartments.
Really? Yeah,
That's where they lived.
You know who else I was thinking about? The guy that was over at public health school, who lives in Carborough. Lots of children.
Lots of children?
Mm-hmm.
You don't mean
Wait a
land,
minute,
land, do you? You don't mean land, do you?
Who?
No, I'm not talking about land. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He was a health education.
That's right. There was somebody
Who
like
was
that.
that?
Was that Ted?
Ted?
That was Ted?
That was Ted Parrish.
That was Ted Parrish?
I don't know what
I
he
don't
was
remember
doing.
a lot of kids, but Ted Parrish, yeah. Definitely in Carborough.
You don't mean Curtis Jackson, do you?
Yeah, I remember Curtis Jackson, but I don't know what he was doing here.
He was in Haddam.
Yeah, but he was
had a
already
brother.
working
He already
on
had
something.
he had a brother too.
Rudy Jackson.
Rudy.
Who was
Yeah.
in Haddam also.
Rudy was along with me.
You kidding? They're brothers?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Curtis actually was here in the early 70s. 'cause
Yeah,
he
that's
was,
why he came
he was
back.
the same
I
with
saw
my
him,
wife.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense now. Okay. Yeah.
Aren't they from Mississippi or something?
I'm sorry?
Aren't they from Mississippi?
Curtis? I think they were from Chapel Hill, actually.
Yeah, right. I think so too. They're actually from Chapel. There were several people who were actually
We're from
born
Chapel-
and went to school in Chapel Hill.
Okay.
The guy from he was OB-GYN at the medical school later on. He and his wife.
Oh,
He's
I know
now
who you're
teaching at Morehouse.
I know who you're talking about.
Thin.
Yes, I can't think his name.
He was doing a dual in medicine and epi.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, and then his wife was here too as a student, but
she
she was
was-
working as well.
Yep.
And they were originally from Chapel Hill. I can't remember.
She wasn't, but he was.
Huh?
She was not. She's from the islands.
Oh, okay. I guess because he was from Chapel Hill, I assumed
Okay,
she
yeah,
was.
No, she's from the islands.
Oh, okay. And there was someone else. Gene Hines was from Chapel Hill. Do you remember Gene Hines?
I remember him since then, but not, I
Yeah.
didn't meet him as a graduate.
He was earlier, I think, because he was a contemporary of my wife's.
Yeah.
So that would have been 72,
yeah.
73, 74.
Okay.
So there are a number of students who were actually born in Chapel Hill.
but that talks about how that was one of my theories, that the people that were from this area were the ones that were really recruited initially, and
right.
that those of us that came from far and near
Yeah.
were part of a general. We weren't particularly recruited for the minority pool, but
Yeah.
we
Well,
got
some-
here.
Yeah.
And there was there's a difference between those that are from here
Right.
and
That's true.
like the ones that went to Central. I
Right.
don't think they ever were active with the minority conference,
Right.
with the caucus. One they
Right.
had were commuting.
Yeah.
But just the fact that they didn't see the same need
Right.
because they just came in and left out.
Yeah.
Whereas we were around, we saw, we were interacting
Yeah.
and
I think there was a shift right around that time too, because some of us were recruited here. Sherman and I talk about how the chair of the Epi department recruited us here, and apparently they made quite an effort to identify students who were interested in epidemiology John Castle. I don't know why I could forget his name.
Mm-hmm.
He recruited three of us into he recruited 4 African Americans into epidemiology. Jerome Wilson, Leo Hendrick. Jerome was at Harvard. I was at Georgetown. Sherman was at University of Washington, St. Louis. I don't know where Leo Hendricks was from, but for whatever reason, he decided he was going to bring in black students into epidemiology, and he was successful. Which really talks about the fact that any chairman could sit down and basically say, "I will recruit black students to Chapel Hill, and it will be done." So the decision about recruiting black students has never been a mystery. They have these conferences now, like that one last week on how to recruit black students to Chapel Hill. It's not a mystery. You just need somebody who wants black students at Chapel Hill, and that's the end of that. So anyway, so let's focus on the development of the conference and the caucus. So this idea about having a caucus had been, talked about, but in around 1976, there were now enough students to actually work on the idea of having a conference, and those students. That's also the time at which the Black Student Caucus grew to expand to other minority students as well. So all of this was happening at the same time around 1976. So we had that first conference. Did you attend it?
Yes, I did attend.
Okay, and but didn't participate in the planning.
And I did, but wasn't a part of the planning.
Right. Okay. But after that first experience,
and remember that conference was 2 days.
Yeah, in the auditorium.
In the auditorium.
Right.
This was the 1977 conference. I just want to say that for the
77.
recording.
Yes, it's the 1977 conference.
Okay.
It was 2 days long. It was free and open to the public.
That's right. Simply because we were too disorganized to register people.
I don't know. I wasn't part of the planning.
Right.
But, the idea that the conference, when I look at some of the things that they, the rough drafts that they have and the intent was to provide the additional that was not being given in the classroom.
Right.
One is that we didn't have a whole lot of minority faculty.
That's right.
And it was very limited. And we also, they brought experiences from the teaching perspective, but we were going into the workforce.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was really nice that, the grandparents, the people that, came over to the conference, they saw it as fulfilling a need here in North Carolina. I have to say that I don't think they were just thinking about this, provide something for the students. They were saying other workers are not getting it either here in North Carolina. Let's put on where we can have people to talk to and to interact and to talk about some of these national issues.
Exactly. And unfortunately, like most things, the spark, it was a negative spark, but it was a positive effort. A faculty person in the school unfortunately didn't realize that one of the students in his class was African American and made an unpleasant joke or a statement. And when he realized that a black student was in the class, he panicked and tried to pressure the student not to say anything. That made the situation even worse until we had this little, I won't even call it a demonstration, but clearly a open and frank discussion about, what happened and why it happened. And unfortunately, even in that day and time, you had people with some prejudices. But even more interesting, it was expected that you had prejudices then, and it's expected that you would have faculty with prejudices today. The problem was in trying to hide the fact that there were prejudices that caused the problem, actually.
The cover-up is often worse than the crime.
Say that again?
The cover-up.
Cover-up is
That's
often
right.
worse than the crime.
That's right. That's right.
You remember? I do remember that.
Yeah.
You just brought it to mind.
Yeah, and some of us gave Dr. Greenberg a headache. Because some of us had been used to, that kind of more confrontational things. And once individuals who were more confrontational heard about what had happened, the whole thing became, far. But Dr. Greenberg's interest and commitment to resolving the problem actually ended up being something positive, because there was a greater focus on, what do we do? How do we solve some of these problems? And got support from his office. So, yeah, what started out as a rather negative event turned out to be positive. But that's been the history of racism in America, too. I mean, people forget that the Civil War started because a few inebriated cadets at the Citadel decided to bomb Fort Sumter. But, what started out as a very negative outcome became emancipation for African Americans. So, yeah. So anyway, so how was it in the planning of that second conference?
We had grown by that time.
Yes, absolutely.
Grown in the sense that the students that were going to do the planning, that saw on the first year planning committee, some of the same ones were in the second year, so they knew how to go on.
Right.
And I just remember that, in the process of the second year, I think APHA was down in Miami, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
And a whole big long bus load of us went down to Miami. We could also we could look forward to doing something in the spring and make contacts. So we were networking back in the day, in the 70s.
Right. I remember I wore a Carolina blue suit to my presentations at APHA at the Fontainebleau.
At the Fontainebleau, that's right.
That's right. Because that was the wildest suit I had ever bought in my life.
It's 77.
Yes.
I think that is true.
That's true. I think I had 2 or 3 presentations at that conference.
Okay, and so I could see that we had grown in the sense that the involved people had somewhere to go. They had the year before to lean back on and went with it, and so they chose a speaker that was, they're from New York. Down here in North Carolina. Coming down to North Carolina, that I think was really great. Showed you that we were getting more of a national perspective.
Yes, absolutely.
As compared to the year before when we were getting a local.
That's right.
And we had, I have to say, when I think about Bill Doherty, to me he was like, even though he was of national, renowned, national attention and stuff, he was local. He was always around us,
That's
and, telling us that he had done it.
That's right.
And so I think about him as being, local.
Yeah.
Just encouraging.
And not only that, the people like John Holloman and Bill Doherty and Pat Doherty and all of these people, these were people who were gentlemen in public health. They wore suits. Not like my generation when we came in the 60s, we were wore afros and dashikis and gave people apoplexy. But that group before them, many of whom I actually worked with, because I was the youngest EEO officer in the Public Health Service by something like 20 years. So I had an opportunity to learn from these more gentlemanly-like people, although I didn't act like that all the time. But there were so many of them, and they're largely forgotten, I think, in public health. And John Holloman, certainly, it was one of the people who represented that era in public health, where, for example, some of them work in public health service, but they weren't allowed to work in the public health service, especially the Commission Corps, until they had already worked out into the field. They had to have years of experience before they could work in public health for the government. And as compared to those of us who came straight out of school, we came straight out of school and got into our uniforms and people were saluting us. We didn't appreciate the sacrifices of the generation before us. So we were less patient, less appropriate in our dress and in our language. But it was an incredible learning experience. So, as you remember in the planning committee for the conference, this now you all are a new generation because you all were thinking differently, I think.
That's true.